long, but we'll see what happens. So this is about involuntarily celibate individuals. They're like the modern day lepers now, noticeably. In particular, men, just a large conglomerate of men who can't, um, who are basically like invisible for the most part. So a large part of this is because most of our socializing has kind of shifted from reality to electronic uh, dating apps, Plenty of Fish, Tinder. Um, these apps have kind of made it difficult for just the average individual to get to know the average individual. So with these apps, you have kind of a chasing of the the greatest, the biggest and greatest thing. And you have this, of course, on both sides. But where it becomes extreme is that on a natural distribution between the sexes, the average woman ends up trying to find the top 10-15% of men, and the 80-85% of men in the population end up either abjectly lonely, or they have to you have this thing nowadays um, called passport bros phenomenon, where men in America are actually going to different countries to find women, because the women in the United States, their standards have gone to such heights that the average man, even making like 35 to 50K, like can't really attract the average woman. And when he does attract that woman is looking for the next. She hasn't really found her how do you say, she hasn't really found the best option, and in her mind it's like, well, he could be better at this, or this could be better, or this could be better. But which is it's natural to not get everything you want, but it's gotten to the point where the desires of the average woman in the West has become insatiable, to where the average guy can't fulfill it. um, so you actually have guys going to poor countries to actually get with those women because they're easier to satisfy, um, which is interesting. But then this is slightly outside of the crisis we have, with the incel crisis, which um, that crisis is happening for a plethora of different reasons. Now, in my case, I just have to explain. In my case, I wasn't. So I thought I was kind of that guy when I was younger, but no, women were actually attracted to me. It was just um, I was oblivious to it mostly. Um, I didn't really notice. Uh, I think I was more attractive than my than my self esteem. Like I had higher, like I was more attractive than my self esteem level. So I didn't notice that they were attracted to me, but when they were, um, I think after a while I caught on and I started learning the cues. Um, you know, I think I'm pretty like practically autistic when it comes to like social situations. I tend to catch on to things a little slower than a lot of people, and I'm not very quick on the draw. I think that was my main, still is my main issue. Um, Interesting enough. Uh, So yeah, where I would fit on the line is if you had like an incel and then you have slightly above the incel, which is just the average. Well, actually the average guy would fit in the incel range and would fit in the above the incel range as well. So like a guy who, I don't know, maybe after like 5 or 6 months somehow he gets a girlfriend. Or he gets some maybe either a girlfriend or a hookup or something like that. Um, so I didn't really have anything prepared for this. I was just trying to go off the top of the head. But what I can say is, for me, uh, when it comes to this issue, I was not quite an incel, but I was not very much in demand. I wasn't quite invisible, but I had to work to actually be visible, if that makes sense. Um, I don't really know exactly what to think of it, but I would say compared to guys who never got any attention from anyone ever, I would say, I mean, I actually do understand where they're coming from and why they feel like it's kind of impossible to turn the tables on that kind of situation. Um, I mean, my thinking is because a lot of times women will tell men, well, we want confidence. We want a guy who's confident. But the most confident men are going to be men who are actually seeing the results in the dating room. They're going to have the most confidence because they're going to know what works, right? So if you're like constantly rejected year after year, month after month, to where you don't actually see any progress, I think is actually more pertinent is that it's not necessarily the rejections that dwindles the confidence. It's that the rejections, if there's no consistent, uh, if there's no consistent um, movement from one stage to the next stage in terms of like competence and understanding how to navigate uh, dating, right? Women, one of the more frustrating things about them is that whenever you're dating them, they have this, it's almost this aristocratic view of dating, right? Where they automatically expect individuals like the guys to just know how to do something and how to make this effect happen. And if the guy can't produce the effect or whatever butterflies or feelings or whatever, um it's almost like he created he it's almost like he did this very bad thing, but it's not really something that you're taught. It's just something like for a guy, it's just something you run into a couple of walls, and eventually after running into it, you're like, "Ow, that hurt. How do I not run into that?" Right? Because a woman, she doesn't like she just goes to people who already understand and who already know. She's not really like I'm trying to figure out how you compare it. It's almost like I guess it's similar to like royalty, right? Or to a person who's well off and they understand or they shop at certain places and they have a maybe they just interact at a different level. But a person who comes into the environment with that individual, that person is going to expect that that person already knows customs and they already know the same products, the same type of individuals. They already have connections. They already have understandings of things because they're assuming that the person is like them, and they just kind of get things by either throwing money around or it just happens. But a lot of times in guys' cases, this isn't the case. They they learn things through trial and error, and it typically happens. Eventually, the guy just stumbles upon some woman. eventually after, maybe he makes some progress and he goes, okay, that didn't work because she stared at me and she frowned. So I tried this thing and this thing worked. Right. Um, so yeah, I guess what I'm saying is I can understand the frustrations of the average guy and even that guy who would actually be considered like, super incelly or whatever. That is I understand the frustrations because I've kind of gone through it quite a bit. I also don't understand what I don't understand is why people um I don't understand why people use that status as a way of shaming a person for not being enough for other people, right? I was thinking about this recently because if you have like a poor person, right, and we would say, okay, you're okay, you're a hobo or you're like just some poor homeless guy, and you just call them homeless like as a way to shame them. It seems kind of ridiculous, but we kind of do this to individuals nowadays who are extremely lonely and who aren't that good at dating. They're not. They're maybe they don't groom themselves well. Maybe they're socially awkward, right? Um, it seems weird that we do this, especially in the modern times and how it's so everyone is so isolated and they're so fixated on technology and so fixated on interacting primarily online. Uh, like I can recall going to places and uh, talking to people, but then after getting the number, I was thinking to myself, like, wow, I don't think like trying to figure out how to get it to a real world, like in person interaction. But it was almost like it was easier to do via texting or a phone call. Phone calls were worse for a lot of people. Nowadays it seems like texting is the go to because you don't have to show your face. You don't have to worry about the tone of another person's voice. You don't have to worry about uh, consequences, guilt, making someone feel bad, or something like that. So the title is really provocative, and I guess I should talk about it. There's a African proverb, and I'm gonna see if I can look it up. Let's see if I can look it up. So there's an African proverb, and it kind of explains what's happening in the modern day with the average man in our social media frenzy kind of society. So the quote goes, "The child who is not embraced by the village will burn it down to feel its warmth." It's kind of messed up, but it has a good point. There's a lot that is within the quote, and it's kind of strange to me that we shame individuals who are suffering from loneliness. Now, this would actually be the case regardless of whether it's a man or a woman. We shame um, people for suffering and for having issues and not being able to solve things. Right? It'd be one thing if it was just a person who was super annoying, a really bad person morally or something like that. But no, we just shame individuals who are without. It's really interesting. Um, one other thing, I guess the last thing I would say about the whole incel loneliness crisis in the American man is that the way energy works, which is kind of frustrating, but it is what it is. The more of something, the more you feel you don't have something, the least likely you are going to be able to actually get something, right? So if you're if you're thinking that you don't have, like, you just say, "Oh, I'm lonely, no one likes me, no one wants to talk to me." Well, energetically, you're reinforcing that, and the likelihood of you actually getting someone to interact with you socially, or finding a girlfriend, or finding a group of friends, or something like that, is going to be significantly less, just for the mere fact that you actually threw that out in the universe. Now, the frustrating aspect of that, the frustrating part about that is, on the other end, people who are surrounded by lots and lots of people, they have no issues finding more and more and more people, and more opportunities, and more girlfriends or boyfriends or whatever. Like, it kind of happens just for the fact that they have a lot of it already. So it kind of, more people and more things are attracted to them simply because they already have a lot of things, um, which is kind of interesting. It's like the less you have, the harder it is to actually get something. But the more you have, the harder it is not to get something. I don't know what it is, but in my case, I've experienced it to where, when I would actually try and go and talk to women, especially when I was a little bit younger, when I try to go out and talk to them, um, it typically would make things worse, and nothing would really happen. Like, I wouldn't really get any type of results or anything. But when I didn't really care anymore, it was like they were attracted to me, and they would come to me. It was the strangest thing. It annoyed the hell out of me, actually, for the longest time. Uh, but I just kind of came to terms with it. It's just how the universe works. Um, is there a way around it? Nope. No, there's not. Um, but if I could offer at least one solution to men who are feeling uh, either lonely or purposeless, but let's just focus on one at this time, because this video is just speaking about the social aspect of things. I'm not talking about uh, purpose and all of that uh, right now in this video. So, for those guys who are feeling like that, I would just say, because some people say, hey, you should go out and talk to people if you're feeling lonely. Here's the thing, that's actually that actually could be terrible advice. I've had situations where I felt like super lonely, and like, kind of like a loner, right? I kind of I am kind of like, I keep to myself, but um, sometimes you go out and you talk to people, and people actually reinforce reasons why you want to stay away from people, and they actually make it worse, right? To where you actually start to become fearful of talking to people because of how they're interacting with you. um, this is just my opinion, generally speaking, and I'm not talking about the individual here, because I know people are different. People are generally very selfish. They're generally, um, they're not very forgiving. They're very selfish. They're very, um, they have a they have a very narrow focus of the world, especially the people who are actively consuming. So, like, people who are shopping, people who are in the just they're actively in the market, going out and buying things and things like that. Our consumer society has kind of created a world where people are disposable, and also a world where people, our interactions are becoming more cheap. They're becoming cheaper. They're becoming more hostile as well, and that's politically, because we're kind of dividing everything up among lines of well, who has suffered more. Oh, this group has suffered more, this group has suffered more, this group is more important because they've gone through more stuff. Oh, and this group is awful because their ancestors did this and did that. um, that's kind of creating a world where people are just hostile towards each other, and I don't really know the solution to that. um, Obviously we're kind of in the thick of it. um, but yeah, the incel issue is going to be uh, probably one of the bigger issues in the next 5 to 10 years. That's going to be even worse 5 years from now, because now I think statistically males in the United States specifically, I think it's like, what is the stat? I think it's 50% of men, either 40 to 50% of men have not had sex in the last 2 or 3 years. But then this is just what's reported, and it's believed that the figures are higher. And that's compared to women, which that the I think the percentage for women is like 20% less. So I think it's like 20 something, 30% or something like that. Um, so I believe that those figures are going to get even astronomically worse. But you actually have men coping with the social pressures by trying to, or by allowing their wives or girlfriends to go out and date other men. I don't agree with that. I mean, you have people, everyone has their beliefs and things like that, but it's just a coping strategy. They're just coping with the current market and how difficult it is to actually get a partner. That's their way of coping with it, and compromising, which to their detriment, in my opinion, because you're not really going to get any real ounce of loyalty there. And the other thing is, your own paternity is in question, which is, I mean, the red flag there is, well, mama's baby, daddy's maybe, right? Hey, burns his village to feel the warmth.